Ziad and Craig have permission to keep it real. When I heard you give a presentation and say, may I have your permission to keep it real, it took it to a different level.
Mhm.
You asked for permission to have someone's attention and then to be real with them. And so I want to keep it real. I'd like to start just by hearing your perspective. What are your initial thoughts about what's going on across the globe regarding being Black in America?
So I'm pausing because that's a big question. But here's my initial reaction. And it takes me back to a conversation I was just having with my wife about an hour ago, and also a conversation we had over the past few days. She was asking me what my reactions were, my reflections on the issues of the day, and how things have come to a boiling point, and now it's starting to explode. And my initial reaction then, and having the conversation my wife had now, is for John and Jane Q American public, welcome. Welcome to the world that many of us have been living for years, decades, a lifetime, and then a generation before that, and a generation before that. People are outraged at some of the things that they're seeing firsthand. These are narratives and stories that have been repeated generation after generation after generation, that has either gone disbelieved, that has either gone unheard, or disregarded if heard. And now the issues and the things that people have been talking about, not only the issues as it relates to Black men and women and the police, but also just racism abroad, bias, institutional racism. There have been example after example after example presented to John and Jane Q America, where now they can no longer ignore it. And I was talking to someone a couple of years ago during the presidential campaign, and he was expressing his frustration and fear that Trump was bringing forth these people that feel as though they have permission and are emboldened to speak racist rhetoric. Yeah. And my response to him, and he was an older white guy, my response to him was, no, I appreciate it. I am appreciative of the fact that these conversations are no longer happening in quiet corners and in the shadow of darkness. And now these issues are right in front of people, front and center, where they can no longer be ignored. And now it's time for people of goodwill to make a decision.
And right now, when you say welcome to our world, you mean the experience of violence in America, the uncertainty in America, the insecurity of being present in your own home or in your own space and not knowing exactly how the outcome is going to be, or I don't want to interpret too much what you say, welcome to our world. What do you mean exactly by welcome to our world?
Welcome to the experience that folks that look like me, that we've been living for a lifetime. And it's not only isolated to the state of Washington, it's across the country, across the globe, right, where there's different challenges all across the world. But specifically what I'm talking about, welcome to my world, is now you have a glimpse. You have seen on television recently two extreme examples, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in a second, two extreme examples of how race comes into play in everyday life. If I explained it to you, you wouldn't quite understand it. Just like as a lawyer, right, and as a trial lawyer, we can explain things, but if I show it to you, if you see it with your own eyes, without my interpretation, then you have to believe it because it's right there in front of your eyes.
I don't think you have to believe it, Craig. I don't mean to be antagonistic here, but I think we've seen it for a long time and chose to say, oh, that's just how it is. They did something wrong. Find an excuse. They shouldn't have been in that house. Why were they in somebody else's property in the first place? They shouldn't have been resisting when they pulled him out of the car. What are the two examples you're thinking of? So I also don't make assumptions.
The two examples that I'm thinking of are, and folks know the example in Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
and
George
there's
Floyd.
also the example in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll put names to that one too, Cooper and Cooper.
Okay.
Okay. So we have those extreme examples where one person was killed as a result of violence. And then we have the other where no one was physically hurt, but everyone was allowed to see how it is that white privilege can cause or potentially cause harm to another person.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are examples on either end of the spectrum. And so, of course, there are various levels that happen in between. But those two examples of opposite ends of the spectrum provide an opportunity to explain to people, like, look, it doesn't always have to be someone who is killed where we should raise up and speak our truth. But then there's also on the other side where everyone saw this happening. They saw this guy wasn't doing anything, but because of his race, he was made to appear like he was a criminal.
Because the lady was calling in on 911 saying there's an African-American male threatening me.
That's the one. That's
and
correct.
all he did was put a video on to protect himself.
That's correct.
That's how I read that.
That's correct. And if you take a step back, she had a dog that was, it was my understanding, she had a dog that was off leash, and it was required that you had your dog on a leash.
Right.
So she was actually the one that was violating whatever rule or regulation there was in that area. But yet he was made, when he was asking her to enforce it, he was made to appear as though he was a criminal in all of this.
And now we skip over to Minneapolis, and George Floyd is, the picture I see of George Floyd that I've been seeing all weekend, the picture that you see is the officer's knee on his neck. What they don't show you very often is the three other officers that were holding him down while that was going on. They don't show you that picture very often. It's almost to singularize it to this one person. Although all four officers were fired, only one was charged. But there were three of them holding him down at that same time. And that when you see that perspective of it, you see a completely different picture. In your leadership roles included leadership as the chief criminal deputy in the city of Seattle, where they're having to make tough decisions about enforcing curfew and enforcing peaceful protests. That's a very important perspective to me. Your current experience is as a civil litigation attorney who files suits against law enforcement agencies who cross the line, who oppress people's civil rights. And so you've seen it from both perspectives, where you have to balance that. And so my question to you is, Craig, what's the city supposed to do? There's cities across the country. What's the proper response? What do we expect is a proper response here?
So, and speaking from my experience as the chief prosecutor, one of the things that I make clear to everyone who ever asks me about this is that you don't enforce the law based upon the topics that are being protested. Right? You enforce the behavior, not the reason for the protest. You can't pick and choose. And so if people are showing displays of violence, you have to deal with it straight up. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you disagree with the reason for the protest, but you're simply ensuring that there is some modicum of public safety, right? And you have to enforce the law in that regard. Let me
just come back with a response here and say, but the protests are in response to the fact that they haven't been consistently enforced, that some wrongs go absolutely unpunished when it comes to one side and extremely punished when it comes to the other. One man loses his life, the other gets away with an administrative suspension.
I'm torn, because on one side is dealing with these issues and having dealt with them in the past, you don't want to allow for destruction, but you can't create an opportunity when you do enforce that you're creating greater violence or causing greater risk to those who are in that area. So there is a fine balance, and they have a very tough job. They being the officers that are there on the street,
Yeah.
trying to do what they can, as well as the administrators that are the ones that are presenting the orders to these folks. They have a tough job, but it's tough for me because I understand both sides. I understand, just like Langston Hughes says, right? What happens to a dream deferred? Have you ever heard that poem before?
What happens to a dream deferred?
Yeah, so a dream deferred, right? So read
Yeah.
that poem. So basically, what
Okay.
happens to a dream deferred when you suppress a dream and suppress somebody's rights for so long? What happens? And then at the end, he asks the rhetorical question: does it explode? Right?
Yeah.
And so I understand that when you get to a place where people get to the point where they feel as though they have nothing else to do but lash out because they've tried everything else, I get it.
It seemed like the majority of people in the protests really wanted to be very peaceful. In fact, up here in Bellingham, we had a very peaceful protest. There was a great memorial set up, and there was a long walk through downtown Bellingham. I got to watch some of it on video. We didn't have anybody burn anything. I also watched video of people instigating that spark from peace to violence. And that's disturbing to me. And I don't know where that balance is. Is that an angry person that's deferred their dream and explodes now? Or is that someone just trying to push it into a completely different level, right?
I think in these instances, just from what I know, because of course I haven't talked to the people who were involved in the instigation, but I would bet my money that those are just instigators, opportunists, right?
Yeah.
People that are looking for opportunities to cause issues. Back in the time when I was at the city attorney's office and having to deal with these issues, a lot of those individuals who caused the mayhem, if you will, were people that were outside of the true core reason for whatever the protest was all about. And more likely than not, at the time, there were people who identified themselves as anarchists, dressed in all black, and at the time had the masks over their face, and anarchist garb, if you will. And so those were the ones that came in and used that opportunity of these protests to deliver mayhem. That's plain and simple what I've seen in my experience, and I believe that to be the case in the recent protests.
I've seen lots of images of protests. It's with the exception of having to wear masks for COVID, the type of protests I see don't require masks. The type of protests I've known in my life don't require that you have to hide your face because
That's right.
You are proud to present that position. We're out here, we're going to talk some real talk. We're going to give some real ideas, and neither one of us need to wear a mask to do that. Even though you give a great presentation on the mask, I'll never forget that presentation. The mask that we got to wear to get to where we want to go, and then realize you never need to wear it because it hurts you more. And I'm paraphrasing a wonderful speech you've given for us before. But when we're speaking our truth and we're keeping it real, we don't need a mask. We need a mask to hide from what the rule of law is, potentially.
In those instances, you're absolutely right.
My instinct to the question, what do you do in a situation where people feel like it's been unjust for so long, and you're telling them, no, you got to be consistent about how you enforce the law? I think you have to be consistent. That's the rule of law, right? That's the rule of law. You got to be consistent about it. However, there is discretion in our legal system. You know that as a prosecutor, there's discretion in our legal system. At some point you can read the story of a protester that got caught up in the middle of everything, and the one that's just an opportunist breaking into stores and stealing things. And at some point there's going to be discretion, right? And I mean, that coming as a defense attorney, it feels that way sometimes. If you feel like there's been a little bit of bias in the enforcing of some of the laws, or that we've revealed an opportunity to teach or train an officer, it feels like you got to approach that so delicately. How do you feel about that? What do you say to me as a defense attorney asking you that question? When I see it, I'm supposed to speak up. But when I speak up, I got to do it kind of delicately.
So all these things that you're talking about that I'm hearing is essentially the core of what it means to be a prosecutor. And when I was growing up as a young prosecutor under the leadership of Norm Mailing, what he used to tell me all the time, and tell all the other prosecutors as well, is that each person, each file is an individual story, and we have to listen to the whole story and understand all that's going on before we make a decision that will impact their lives. And so we really have to take the time to figure it out. Now, that's more challenging to do when you have a very heavy caseload and you're simply just managing hundreds of cases and trying to keep your head above water. But you got to do the best you can. But most importantly, and I bring up Norm, and I would also bring up Pete, the city attorney for Seattle, you have to have political courage, of which both of them did. And Norm used to tell us all the time that you can't mix the business of politics with prosecution. And so you have to do what's right by all people in our community, and that would include the people who have been charged with crimes. It depends on the leadership and how it is that the leadership influences the deputies within his or her office.
So if someone's listening to this and they think, well, what comes to Bellingham, what do we need? We need people with political courage.
That's right.
Right? That's a
Plain
great
and simple.
That's a great answer, right?
In addition to that, there also needs to be people within the office that have perspective. And that's where, in my mind, it gets down to who it is that's on the inside and that is working day to day as a prosecutor. That makes a difference too. That's why it's important to have diversity of age, diversity of thought, diversity of race, diversity of religion, all across to act, act as a check and balance.
Right.
So there's different perspectives and life perspective. So when you do present to a prosecutor and say, hey, this, and this happened, there may be somebody that you talk to have that life experience that could be able to understand, yeah, that's happened to me, or I've heard that it happened, or that's not out of the realm of reality. Mm-hmm. And so with that perspective, they'll be more likely to at least consider some of the things that you're talking about. But if they never had that life experience or that perspective, then they won't be able to comprehend what it is that you're trying to present to them as a mitigating factor for a reduction of whatever that is.
When we started this conversation, I was telling you about a comment that I read from one of our former deputy prosecutors up here, and I was just so impressed by it. It was a lot of great sentiment, and I'm not going to use her name because I didn't get her permission to. I was just impressed, and to know that she was at our prosecutor's office. To know that it was reassuring to me. I mean, she's not there now; she's moved on to other work. But I mean, to know that is it's a reassuring thing. I mean, I think people are feeling very uncertain and uncomfortable already because we've had the stay home order that we've had to live by. Sure. And we're not sure how much of our freedom is being taken away for very good reason, and how much of it is being taken away because nobody really knows, and they need to put something in place that works. I've tended to fall along the lines of we're going to follow the stay home order. We're going to stick with it, and we're going to make sure that we're home, healthy, and safe.
Yes.
But people are already cooped up. They're feeling pretty tired. And I saw a bunch of people that weren't social distancing during the protest because some things are more important or a bigger priority. What kind of advice could you give to the young protester that's going out there, the old protester that's going to go out there, the peaceful protester? What kind of advice could you give to them?
If my kid, who's say 21 years old,
mm-hmm.
if he were to ask me, do I think it's a good idea? If he were to ask me, Dad, do you think it's a good idea if I were to go out and participate in this protest in this day and age? My response to him would be, if you believe that it's important and you believe that there is something at stake for you and for your neighbor, then do it. Protect yourself. Be careful. Wear a mask, do whatever you need to do. Wear a full bodysuit if you need to. But be careful in this day and age, just simply by reason of the pandemic. But be careful. But if it's that important to you, then do it. But you got to be safe about it.
Mm. I think that's pretty real. My instincts would be, you're going to get in that crowd and they're going to be indiscriminate about what direction they shoot. And I don't want you to be the one that gets shot. It's a different perspective. It's a very overprotective perspective.
Your perspective is a perspective of safety, but also of comfort, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if we tell everybody, hey, just stay home because you may be indiscriminately shot at, okay, then everybody stays home, and then what? Are we just doing a Twitter protest? Maybe on Instagram protest? I mean, what are you going to do then?
A Zoom protest?
Right? A Zoom. I mean, if they work, there's some value to that. Maybe we should start one.
Yeah.
But there is nothing more inspiring and empowering when you are there shoulder to shoulder next to someone who believes it just as strongly as you, and you're showing up and being present. Mm-hmm. And uplifting and inspiring, because when you're at a moment when you feel powerless, right, when you are bound together with another that feels the same way as you do, that provides that inspiration and that power to know that collectively you can do something, that you do have a voice just by being present. And when you look to your left and to your right and in front and behind you, and nothing you see and everything you see are just people that are of the same cause, then there's nothing, it's uplifting.
It's pretty empowering. I'm inspired by that. It reminds me that we have to be uncomfortable to make progress. You can't make progress and be comfortable the whole time. It's never going to work. In this circumstance, what is progress, Craig? What does it take? And well, let me ask this specifically. Is progress the conviction of this officer for George Floyd's murder?
Would I identify the conviction of the officer, Mr. Floyd, to be progress? Some would say it's progress. I would say that it would be an individual act of justice. And I, in turn, would go to my elders and ask them, based on your perspective, what has the progress been, if it has been any progress? Mm-hmm. Because they have that perspective of, folks that we know, right? Born in the 40s, born in the 30s, that can talk about, hey, here's what it was like in the 30s and the 40s, where I couldn't even live in the same neighborhood as a white person. And now here we are in 2020, and my next door neighbors are all different races and religions. Has there been progress from that perspective? I think we could say, yeah, because I think about even my own experience where it doesn't matter who the law enforcement officer is that pulls me over. I'm still, every time, as the former criminal division chief for the city attorney's office, if ever I get pulled over, I'm still going to call one of my friends, put him on speakerphone, let him know, hey, I just got pulled over by the police, so just listen. And my friends on the other line will say, okay, because they will understand.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
You, as the former chief criminal deputy for the city of Seattle, are still going to put a friend on record when you get pulled over?
Not on record, on speakerphone.
On speakerphone?
Sure.
That's regularly what you would do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell the story all the time when I do trainings on race, and people are shocked by this.
Yeah, I'm shocked too. I would never do it.
But when my friends come with me, some lawyers that come with me to these trainings, and then when I tell the story about that, and then I point to my friend, whoever is there at that day, and I said, hey, so-and-so, would you agree with me? And they they're Black lawyers, and they would very well accomplished. And they would say, yeah, I'd call you, you'd call me. That's just kind of the way it is. And nobody would trip about it because that's just kind of the way it is. That's what we do. And that's just life. Welcome to my world. That's what I'm talking about. But I want to go back to, you can't always put that on the police, because that's also things that, trauma that I'm carrying and that other Black people are carrying as well. And other people of color, are carrying. So you can't put everything on the police. You got to be fair about it, because the police officer doesn't know me, but I'm feeling some kind of way simply because of the situation, because there is a police officer representative that is there. But even if I don't know this person, I'm still going to feel the same way. That's just real. That's just life. And so you asked me about, is there progress? There is in some respects, but now you all are seeing exactly the experiences that I'm talking about.
I think that has to change. Not you have to you have to do some healing potentially, but as a community, we have to offer a situation where we understand you're likely to want to call your friend when law enforcement comes up.
So yeah, let me tell you this. Let me back up even a couple steps.
Yeah.
So just and again, let me pause before I get to this story. Like, the overall point is, you can't put everything on the police, because everyone has a nickel in the quarter, right? Everyone contributes to the overall situation.
That makes sense.
And so,
that makes
so
a
I
lot
need
of
to make
sense.
that very clear.
Yeah.
So,
Almost any relationship.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So even taking a step back now, just yesterday, I'm in Safeway, and my wife calls me. I pick up my phone. Hey, she tells me whatever she needs to tell me at the store. And then I take my phone and I put it in my back pocket. And then I immediately think, shit, let me pull my phone back out so the cameras will clearly see that this is my telephone. And then I'll do something with my phone, and then I will intentionally either keep it out of my pocket now and walk with it, or put it in very clearly, make it very clear for the cameras that it's my phone that I'm putting in my pocket. That's yesterday's yesterday.
Yeah.
47-year-old, 20+ year lawyer.
Yeah.
Right? But that's just reality. Because I know that people don't know me. They don't know I have a Juris Doctorate degree. All they see is a dude with a hoodie like I got on here, and a baseball hat, and now I have a mask on my face. And again, I don't know what people are thinking, but I always have to be mindful. I don't want to be that guy that gets pulled over by undercover security in the grocery store for trying to steal something, when all I was doing was put my phone in my pocket.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
I know,
that's reality.
Yeah,
right?
okay, but
And
that's the reality. Wait. Okay.
So that's reality. And now and I want to get back now to how we started this conversation. America, welcome to my world. Welcome to our world. You were seeing, again, going back to those two examples, you're seeing extreme examples, but there are varied levels in between of things that happen every day that we just have to deal with. And it just is what it is, right? Until John and Jane Q America are offended by it and will not tolerate it. And that's where we are now. That's why things seem so much different now, because now people see it. And now, instead of Black Lives Matter being a fringe saying or a fringe movement, now you have John and Jane Q America saying Black Lives Matter, because now they understand it, because for some reason or another, these past, most recent couple of examples have tipped the balance.
So when I hear you say it is what it is, I want to clarify that that's not just you submitting and accepting that that's how it is.
So if you ask me, I accept that they are the reality. They're the reality in which I must navigate each and every day when I walk outside of my home. Okay. That's what I accept.
Yeah.
Do I accept it as just being what it is and I just have to deal with it and just kind of eat shit all day? No, not at all. That's not what I'm saying. And it's my job now to do whatever it is that I can to make it different for my kids.
Would that be progress if it's different for your kid? If your kid doesn't have to worry about putting his phone in his back pocket in a Safeway?
Sure. Of course it would be.
That's progress, right?
Of course it would be.
That's why we're protesting? So we have some progress, so you don't have to call your friend when you get pulled over just because that's the way it is? Even though it's not the officer's fault, you want to live in a world, you want your son to live in a world where he doesn't have to call someone on speakerphone when he gets pulled over. Don't you? I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Of course. I want to live in a world where that's the case. As it relates to what are we protesting? So people are out there protesting for various reasons. But what I see as the challenge at this moment is the opportunity to truly, thoughtfully, and thoroughly address issues of police brutality, specifically against Black people, even more specifically against Black men.
Mhm.
That's what I see as being the impetus for the series of mini revolutions, is what I'll call it, that's going on right now.
There are many revolutions.
That's correct.
Hmm.
The looting is opportunistic, but the genesis for the respective marches absolutely were authentic and genuine, with an ultimate desire of bringing attention to police violence.
Is there a solution in sight? How do you feel about body cameras? Do you think that's helped reduce any violence?
What I can tell you is that body-worn cameras have been proved at times to be of value in documenting opportunities where officers have misbehaved, and they have been held accountable as a result. And I know that because of my own personal experience at the city attorney's office.
So in this case, the officer knew he was being recorded. I mean, the camera was right in his face. It couldn't have been more than 10 feet away. And still, it looked like he stared right in the camera and continued on. What is that a sign of intention?
The thing for me, in terms of the body-worn cameras, it's better to have them than not. But here's the issue. In my mind, is that a lot of conversations that I have, and or even at the trainings that I put on as it relates to race, individuals always want to get to the answer and get to the solution of how you address it.
Yeah.
Where I'm from, Ziad, and I think we're around the same age, we always had to show our work.
Yeah.
Right? We just can't see, here's the problem, here's the answer. We got to go through and show our work.
Yeah.
And in my mind, part of the work is having conversations like this. And these are hard conversations to have. And there's going to be some opportunities for uncomfortableness.
Mm-hmm.
But there has to be these conversations. So even in the time we've known each other for over 20 years, but for me just to share this couple of experiences, and for you to be, it seemed like, in shock and awe. I'm in shock and awe that you didn't know that, because it was just part of every day, right?
Yeah.
Something it just is what it is. And so there needs to be a conversation about it, because if I'm going through these things, then people that are younger than me, that don't have these Juris Doctor degrees and don't have the platform and the voice to speak these things, and may feel powerless, then what are they going to do?
Yeah.
And how can you get to these issues without first understanding the truth, right? An individual experience, a collective experience, and listening to it, not in a way that's defensive, but in a way that's truly open and honest. And you're really listening to try and hear what's being said and understand what's being said. And you have to be careful. You can't just have them with everybody every day. But you have to be able to create environments where people can speak their truth. And let me be very clear, Ziad, when I say people to speak their truth, that also includes white men who are oftentimes left out of the conversation about race because they're often seen as the antagonist in this story.
Right.
But they too have a truth to speak, right? And so we have to be open-minded to listen to every perspective.
Right.
In a controlled environment. Let me be very clear. You just can't have this conversation in the street every day. But if you're trying to find some solutions, what's the problem? If you're trying to remodel a house, you just don't remodel about stripping it down and figure out what's going on.
Right.
Make sure you use the appropriate tool. Yeah.
But to me, I think you're right. A lot of people are going to be surprised that they don't live like that. A lot of people don't live like that. And knowing there's an entire population that thinks that that's just how it is, that's going to get passed down. Right? Don't you think? That's going to get passed down to the next generation.
Absolutely.
Make sure you got somebody on speakerphone, son. You get pulled over. That's just how it is, son. And there's that institutional trauma, and now we got to figure out how do we work on that. What else can we do? What else can we do as lawyers, as community members, as leaders? What else can we do?
In my mind, I was just talking to somebody earlier today who asked that simple question, which has, of course, a complex answer. However, everyone has the opportunity to do something. And at the very minimum, if you're 18 years older, you can vote.
I mean, everybody's
Absolutely.
focused on the national vote, but here locally we're electing judges. Last year we elected prosecutor. Those are real voting opportunities, and I think that makes a lot of sense. That's one thing you can do: encourage people to vote for people who are really embodying what you believe in, right? And Christine Reeves, do you know that name?
I know the name. I don't know why though.
Christine Reeves is from Eastern Washington, and she's running for U.S. House of Representatives. And she was a single mother. She was homeless at 16, and she has gotten to the point where she wants to take that experience, that human experience, and take it to U.S. Congress. She gave me a presentation from the heart. And it wasn't just to call to raise funds for her campaign. It was a call to tell me about why her campaign is different. And it is different because her human experience is different. And by the time we were done, I'm like, can I get you to do a presentation for us? Because that is a real human experience people can relate to that.
I'm looking at her website. Yeah, interesting. And it does lay out her story just in very good headings: overcoming adversity and early in life. And this is what I'm talking about, just from what you just said and looking at sort of the head notes in her website. She has perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Perspective from life challenges that John and Jane Q. Public can understand. That's everyday life. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. If you have those people in positions of power and authority, whether it's the U.S. Congress, whether it's a line prosecutor at a local state's attorney's office or prosecutor's office, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because perspective is important.
Because what do you tell the younger generation about that? Because we can vote, sure, you and I, we're ready, we're involved, we're engaged. How do we get a younger generation at 18 to get engaged?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because even in talking to my kids and their friends from middle school on up, it's tough to get kids really to engage and involve and understand the importance of all that's going on, because they're focused on other things, right? And I think appropriately so. As a young teenager, you should be able to enjoy your teenage years without focusing on the grown-up stuff. Let the grown-ups handle the grown-up stuff. However, what you're talking about in terms of having conversations with that 13 and 19 is important, so they can begin looking at these issues well in advance of the time when they can start voting. So when they do vote, they can vote just getting right out the gate, not having to stumble like a newborn horse. Right. We're gonna see TikTok videos coming from you, Ziad.
Craig, I'm already on TikTok. You got to follow my traffic man on TikTok. You got to get on it, man. I did a series of there's little rock characters that like we're talking about the COVID crisis. It's been a lot of fun for me. I got no followers, but it's been a lot of fun for me. Well, I'm gonna pause the recording and we can sign off. Thank you. I do appreciate your time, Craig. Thank you.